Hello. Um, Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining me on Sunday versus Saturday. We are today going to be talking to my best friend, Karan, who shall be joining shortly. I brought back my Disney mug for this special event. I'm getting so good at starting these. Can we all remember back to like years ago, months? Okay, it's happening. I think. Yes, waiting. Okay, but yeah, I used to be so bad at starting these, and now I'm so good. Thank you guys for all. Oh my God, your hair!
Oh yeah, I forgot. You haven't seen my hair.
I haven't seen it. I've heard about it, and I'm seeing it now. Oh my God, I love it.
I'm so glad you like it. I promise I'm not having a breakdown.
No, it's good. This feels like a healthy change in quarantine.
Yeah, I what's hilarious about it is I like texted my managers and I was like, I'm not having a breakdown. I just want to dye my hair. And I was like, come on, like there's not going to be any auditions coming in. And I got like the biggest audition of my career, like come in like a week later. And I was like, six.
Thanks, guys. I kind of love that, like, in this day and age, that like that's a completely rational like preface to like, just like an appearance change. Guys, like I just want something new. It's not a breakdown.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm about to like cut my hair back to here again. So stay tuned. Maybe it'll be a different color too.
Maybe I'll cut your hair. It'll be
cool. Let's put a pin in that idea and then not do it. But like, thank you for joining me this early. And discussing everything and anything with me. And I just like your
politics and coffee with you are probably my favorite pastime.
Oh, that's so worrisome. We need to get you coffee. But I do have my coffee. I've already had one cup, so the caffeine is surging through my veins. Okay, so I wrote down some of those questions. We got a lot. I think there were a lot of good questions about kind of everything. I think what I want to jump in, because we talked about it before, like offline, is like the difficulty nowadays in balancing like political views and politics and like reposting on social media and then like in-person relationships.
Yeah.
And because I remember like back when I was in middle school and back when I was in high school, it's like I remember like politics came up. Like I remember in middle school people talking about like my dad's gonna vote for Bush and my dad's voting for John Kerry and that kind of thing. But like A, we didn't really know what that meant, and like B, there was a time when you could separate politics from relationships because it was mostly like about like fiscal policy or like, you know, where do you stand on the welfare state, like that kind of stuff. And now like social justice, racial justice, like human rights are so ingrained.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like expanded past conservative and liberal, and now whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
And for everyone, it's like very different right now.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like growing up, you know, I remember when I was younger, people were like, "Oh, well, I'm voting. My parents are voting for Obama, and if I could vote, I would vote for Obama or whatever it was."
Yeah.
But yeah, you didn't know the impact of it. But I think it's hard to avoid now how important this election is and how it's really going to not only change the course of our like day-to-day lives, but change the course of like the history of America. I think that this is probably one of the more pivotal elections in our history. And, you know, like I had a few adults after Trump was elected were like, oh, you know, like, don't stress out too much. I've never had a president actually personally affect me on a day-to-day level. And it was the opposite for me. You know, I noticed more racism in like my day-to-day life and just I've noticed other people's lives changing day to day, which was like very scary. And I was like, okay, this man has a lot of power and I don't agree with like how he's wielding it. And that's really scary. But yeah, I think that it's changed so much from just being, oh, I'm voting for Republican or Democrat and that like back and forth to, no, I think this is right and I think this is wrong.
Yeah, it does feel like all of a sudden morals are like taking center stage. And also like just a disclaimer, like I don't want to start like don't feel pressured to answer any question that like you don't want to, because like my immediate follow-up to that is, and like I know we touched on this off camera, but like I heard the same thing, right? Like when the election results came out, everyone, I was scared. Like, I cried that night. And, you know, my aunt and my mom were just like, don't worry. Like, this is, like, we lived through similar feelings in, like, the 60s, the 70s. And, like, everyone has always risen to the occasion. Like, it will be okay. It's 4 years. Like, our country can handle this. And I disagree. But, you know, but also, like, on the day-to-day, my life, like, I am a woman, but and that's how I identify as such, but like I am white, and so like I don't feel, to be quite honest, like any more misogyny than I did before, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like people have been more overt about like the misogyny angle, at least like in my experience, but that's not true. I think like this has been like a ticket of acceptance for anyone, like as we've seen, like white supremacists, and even in this last debate, like the inability to denounce like a white supremacist. And like I've seen some very funny memes about it, you know, like tell your side hose to stand down, like girlfriend to boyfriend, and boyfriend like side hose stand by. And like that kind of stuff, it's like a very funny, but at the same time it's like watering down like a very intense and really just like deplorable moment that we all witnessed, which is like our president was unable to say like, this is wrong, and we don't stand for it, which of course becomes like a ticket of like acceptance to like continue that behavior. And so I was like, if you're comfortable, could you kind of like explain to me how that's changed on the day-to-day, but also like no pressure to.
Yeah, of course. I think, and I want to put this in the context that like I live in Los Angeles. I'm really privileged to have resources and live in a city that is quite liberal, and for the most part I like can feel safe, and I'm privileged to feel safe. But I also have, you know, Sarah, like I have friends like you and Sophie and Zoe and so on and so forth, you know, and Nolan, who are safe allies to be around, and I feel protected when I'm with. But as we know, all of America is a white space. Every space that I walk into, I am code switching to adjust to white spaces. And I think I never really felt hostility before in white spaces. And this is the first time in my life that I've felt hostility or prepared myself for hostility. I think in the early days of you know, his presidency, just to be safe when I was flying in southern states, I would be extra on guard, you know, and I would prepare myself for any of that, like, you know, racist comments, people, like whatever it might be. Thankfully, it didn't always happen at like an airport or something. It kind of happened when my guard was down. But it's just happened, like these microaggressions are just like a little bit more, you know, just elevated and amped up, because it's not so much like, oh my god, which part of India are you from? It's, you know, like there's situations where people are literally like, ew, don't touch me, and it's been like linked back to racism, and I think it's just been amped up a little bit more. And what's scary for me is, you know, with all the privilege that I have, if it's this scary for me, I feel really horrible for the people that are genuinely terrified to lose their life at any moment, particularly for Black Americans who live with that nightmare every single day and that fear every single day. And I worry for Black America the most when it comes to this next election.
Yeah, 100%. And I just love you. I just like, I don't know. I'm just very proud to be your friend. But I think like one of the things that it's like the microaggressions, right? Like that you touched on, because a lot of people, I think, like in the face of that art, like of hearing about like racial experience, like race experiences in America, like the response is like, well, I've never seen anyone be racist. And it's like, well, there's like two parts to that, right? It's like overt racism. I mean, like nowadays we're seeing more of it because of like certain like alt-right parties being validated. But like it's usually not like, well, okay, I'm not gonna say usually because I haven't had to experience this, but like to my knowledge, it's not mostly like overt, and a lot of it is like the microaggression, and also just like like the perception, right? Like even if like you're around people who are not racist, like when you're like in national politics, I mean not, aren't racist, but like when you're like hearing in the 24-hour news cycle about like all of the things happening in the different parts of the country where like there are like overt acts of just like blatant racism and like people being unsafe and like all the ways in which like Black America is attacked, like you can't help but like carry that with you when you walk into any situation and like be on guard against it, even if like objectively maybe the people you're around are allies, right? Like you carry that with you. It's not just something you forget and like put down when you're I'm saying you, I'm not trying to tell you how to like how you experience racism, but I mean like I would assume that that's how it's taken. I remember the one time we were walking around like a small town in I think Massachusetts and ended up like I googled, do you remember like I googled the population statistics there? And
Yeah, I
it
remember that.
ended up like the town was like 99% white. And I just remember like everyone looking at you. I'm sorry to bring that up. That's kind of a shitty thing to just
No,
bring.
no, it's not a shitty thing at all. I that is my entire experience
Yeah.
being Asian American is constantly noticing how I'm different, how I'm not I don't match the pattern of the room.
Yeah.
And so I have to adjust to match the pattern. Like I think many marginalized people like feel this way. I also think that like for women in like male dominated spaces, which is most of America, is, realizing that, oh, I'm a woman in this space. How do I adjust for this?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of marginalized people can relate to each other on that aspect, is feeling different, feeling like the other, and wanting to adjust. But this also brings up an interesting thing for me, which is, we aren't always going to notice how the other is oppressed. And I've been in conversations where, with Sophie, where Sophie's been like, this is sexist for this reason. And I'm like, oh, really? I didn't think of this. And she's like, yes, this is sexist because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, of course I don't notice it's sexist because I'm a fucking man. And in my head, like, if it doesn't affect me, it's not sexist. It's not wired. Like, my brain goes, oh, it's wired in a way that goes, oh, if it doesn't affect me, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to hear you speak more on that, because like, we don't always notice each other's oppressions, even though we are both marginalized people.
Yeah. I think it's like I feel that you probably experience the same thing, but it's like it constitutes like a level of overthinking that's just like unwelcome, but like all the time. So it's like when I walk into like a work environment or somewhere, or I'm getting ready to go somewhere, like the first thing I think about is like, how do I look and how do I need to look, and how, like, if I'm going to be like, impressive, then I need to look a certain way. But like in a workspace, you don't want to look too good or else you're not taken seriously. And but at the same time, like women, especially like in workspaces, like me working at this think tank, I'm very, very lucky to like work at an office that is incredible, like that I perceive to be pretty like inclusive and woke. But there is still a level of like, women for the most part I think are taught to like carry the brunt and like internalize conflict and be the person that like calms the waters. So like if there's an argument, like you don't yell back, you like are like, okay, cool, thank you, and like you de-escalate the situation. And like I've talked to the most infuriating one is I've talked to so many friends, and I used to feel this way, and it's still something like I fight against, where it's like I feel like I owe someone like my physical or emotional attraction. Like if I'm not into someone like on a date and I don't want to kiss them at the end of the date, like I feel bad about that. Or like if they bought me dinner, I have to like kiss them in return. Like stuff like a lot of like tit for tat kind of stuff, no pun intended. So like a lot of, I think like where I feel it the most is definitely like as a woman is mostly definitely around like physical, it's like a lot of like internalizing things, like everything is my fault and I have to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think like also, my mental health plays into that as well and like exacerbates it. And then and then the other thing would probably be about like a lot of like physical, like watching myself physically, like how do I look? Do I look good enough to like, you know, be respected? Like that kind of stuff. Things that should not have to do at all with or with like level of respect or, you know, or willing to, like, that have nothing to do with like my ability to speak on a topic intelligently. It's like it doesn't matter what my hair looks like, but I am taught to like you need to be presentable, to be taken seriously, but also like don't act like a man, because that's, it doesn't translate the same way for a woman, right? Like
Yeah.
if a guy in the office place is, and like this is like I feel like it's said all the time, but like really like think about it, right? Like if a woman does the same thing a man does, most of the time it's talked about negatively. Like if a female is promoted to a boss position and it has a really strict, like the previous boss had a really strict attendance, like, you know, tardiness policy, whatever, at work, and was writing up things for like timesheet errors. And then like a woman is promoted and does the same thing. All of a sudden, like she's a hard ass, she's a bitch, like she's
Yeah.
like, you know, trying to get back at it, so on and so forth. But like it causes this like level of overthinking in every situation that I don't know. I feel like you probably completely understand this, which is like you go in thinking like, how am I going to be perceived? Then you have your own preconceptions of how you're going to be perceived. So you're not only reacting in real time to the situation, but you're reacting to how you think everyone else is reacting. And
Yeah.
like for me, I have a lot of cognitive distortion. Like I oftentimes just assume everyone's thinking the absolute worst and like about me, like, and so it's just, yeah, I don't know, it's a lot to handle. Also, I want to 180 really quickly. You mentioned, and like warms my heart, and thank you, that like me, Sophie, Zoe, Nolan are like, you feel that we are safe to be around. And I was thinking like maybe it would be a good thing to touch on like what is that to you, right? Like what is an ally to you? How, what like connotes like a safe person for everybody out here who's like, I have friends and I don't know how to be an ally to them.
Yeah, I think what's helped a lot is noticing that you guys are constantly trying to stay on top of like educating yourself. Um, and I think what was like such an important part of our friendship, Sarah, is like when we were on a walk and you had read So You Want to Talk About Race, and I think that that opened like an even deeper layer of our friendship of understanding each other's struggles and opening another layer of communication. Because the truth is, like, if you want to be like an ally for anyone, it's so fucking uncomfortable and painful at first. It really is just like the most uncomfortable thing, because you're just like, it's easier to box these things away and not talk about them. But the truth is like as soon as you get over that hump, you open up another layer of communication that extends past just talking about each other's oppression. It really helps deepen and strengthen your relationships and feel like a safer space for each other, um, outside of just being like, hey, is this guy bothering you? Or like, hey, are you feeling unsafe in this space? It really helps strengthen friendships, because if you notice that, if your friend is limping, like you want to be like, oh, hey, can you want to use my shoulder? Like you want to hold on to my shoulder? Like, can I help you over to the car? Um, and I think the same thing applies here. It's just educating yourself and being aware and knowing that it is going to be uncomfortable having these conversations. And there's going to be parts where either side messes up and how they communicate and what they say or what they do. But that's a part of the process. We are the product of like frankly, like the foundation of our society is built on catering to a particular person, like a cis white man, and we are really working super hard to change that. But at the end of the day, like we are a product of that machine, and so there's going to be things instilled in us that like cater to that, and it's going to take time to like rework that.
Yeah, and it is, yeah, and it is hard, but I think like it's like you said, it has been like it's really like so beautiful like for our relationship to like not feel like that's off limits. And I think it's easy like as a white person to be like, I'm colorblind, like I don't see, like it's not an issue like for us, right? Like I don't see you like that, like we're just the same, we're equal, I see us as completely equal. And it's like that's so nice that you feel that way, but like it is a privilege to feel that way, and that is like not a privilege that's extended to people who are not white, right? Like everyone else is aware of it, because like you're not aware of it because you're benefiting from it. And like that's something that's like, at first it's like, you know, you have an emotional reaction to hearing like you have privilege, or like, you know, like you don't understand what I'm going through because like you're white, and it feels like an attack, and it feels like, no, like I'm not like that, you don't know what you're talking about, I'm gonna get angry and defensive. And it's just not. It's like, okay, I mean, we talked about this, but like I don't know what it's like to not be white. I will never know what that's like. I can read as many books as I want, listen to as many stories, and like accounts of people's experiences. I will never ever understand. And so like when you share your experiences and like how you feel in a situation, like with someone who, like with a white person or someone who may have said something, like it will never be my place to be like, no, that wasn't racist, like you misread the situation. Like, no, like everything you ever tell me about like your experience with race will be valid, like is valid, is 100% true. And it's the same thing like when I talk to you about my experience as a woman, like you as a man you just won't get it. And it's not like to say like you're not trying hard enough or like you need to do better. It's just that like these are experiences that like we just don't share. And but like you have never once questioned like, no, I think you're wrong, like that wasn't sexist at all, you're misreading the situation of what it's like to be a woman. In the same way that I would never tell you like you don't understand what it's like to be Indian, like you got that one wrong. And so that I think has been one of like the freeing thing of just like acceptance of each other's experiences. And like, so I'm gonna 180 it again and keep
I love it.
A lot of questions, and I'm not good at transitions. And so this there's some really good ones. I'm gonna say, how can college students and young people navigate the political climate in 2020?
Ooh, I mean, you've gone through school, so you know how like stressful and hectic that is. My sister just graduated, and frankly, staying on top of politics while you're in school is incredibly difficult. That's incredibly stressful, and I understand like having to bookmark it and go, I can't do this right now, which is super valid, and that extends past school. But I think what's important is just like, it's okay to start from zero and go, okay, I'm not taking any of this in, and then take bite-sized moments, whether that's listening to like a 5-minute podcast in the morning about what's going on, or just going on Twitter at the end of the night and trying to find like news articles that wrap up the end of the day. But I do think it's important because, and I'm not trying to dramatize, but I do think that the world is in a really unprecedented place right now, and it's important that we're all aware how our vote is going to affect that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that for anyone who's like starting at zero and is overwhelmed, like that's totally okay. Like everybody starts somewhere, like bloom where planted. And I think that my first recommendation is understand the system before you form your opinion, right? Like don't just absorb, don't parrot, don't hear what people say. And even if it's someone you trust and like love, right? Like that's not licensed to just take their opinion and like pass it on as your own if you don't know like what you're really talking about. So I'd say like first it's important to like do a little bit of homework and like understand the systems in which we exist in, right? So like what is the electoral college? Like how does our like election system work? Why are we technically like not a bipartisan country, but pretty much exist within like a two-party system, right? Like what is the historical precedent behind like the Democratic and Republican parties? So on and so forth. I think like, you can pick up, there's like a very short introduction series. It's like a series of books. I have like little mini introductions. Like here's one I bought on the Supreme Court, right? It's like pretty small, and it just takes me through the entire history of the Supreme Court by like an expert. They pick different experts. So like buy one on like the US political system and just like learn how it works. What is gerrymandering? Like why do I keep hearing like filibuster? That doesn't really come up as much as gerrymandering nowadays, but like, you get what I mean. And then like from there, then start to like learn like what's going on and like how, and like form your opinion on top of that. And I think don't get all of your information from social media. Like, and if you are going to get it from social media, like two things, like make sure you're getting it from a reputable source. So like find, find sources of news media that have like a journalism code of practices. So like, do they have like open and transparent like corrections policies? Like at the bottom of articles, are they willing to say like, this article has been corrected because like we misused this name, blah 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 blah? Are they linking to their statistics? So like if they cite something, are they linking to it, or are they citing it at the bottom? Do you know where they're getting their information? And like really, when you read an article, like, are they trying to sway your opinion one way, or are they just telling you the facts as it is? And then like form your opinion, but don't read like I follow the Washington Post on and the New York Times on and even like CNN on Instagram, and they have those like posts where they have just like the headlines of articles, and it's like that is a great way to get interested and then go read the article, but don't take the headline and just like parrot that to people, because you're taking one sentence out of like a 1,000-word like article. Like there's no way that's going to be representative of like both sides or the whole situation. And it's like they're forced to exist in that because of like the social media platform algorithms, but that's a different conversation. Now I'm just talking at you, but yeah, it's like you said, it's like start at zero, be okay with that, and then like start small and learn more, and like find a way that works for you. Like I get the like New York Times like newsletter in the morning and the evening to my email. And if I don't have time to just be on the news all day, which I don't think is great for mental health anyway, then I just like do that and like got something for the day.
And it's okay to take breaks. Like,
yes.
For the past, I'm just coming back into politics like these past 3 weeks. But prior to that, I took like, I want to say like over a month off because I mentally couldn't handle it. Like my mental health was really suffering, and I knew that I cared about these issues, but I needed to distribute the weight a little bit in my life and put focus on some other things just so I could come back to it with like a fresher state of mind.
So how are you handling your mental health? Like what have been some like successful and not successful like approaches to your mental health in quarantine?
Therapy. Therapy's been a lifesaver, baby.
Yeah, relatable.
Asking for what I want and for what I need. Not demanding it, but just asking for it. And that can be, and that like extends past just the actual ask of like, hey, Sarah, I need this from you. I mean more of like an existential sense of like, I need time for myself right now. I want this for myself, and whatever it might be is giving that to myself or working to get that to myself. And it's been hard as someone who like deals with, chronic depression and anxiety. Like it's hard because it's not a steady, line. It's not like, great, you went to 6 therapy sessions and you're all fixed. So it's just about figuring out where I'm at, and I wasn't in a solid place, and I was like, okay, cool. I just have to press the brakes a little bit, and I just have to go back to square one and figure out what I need and what I want, and then see how I can get that for myself, so I can be more present and be there for people.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you know me, like with the same journey with like chronic depression and anxiety, it can just feel like so overwhelming sometimes like and seemingly out of nowhere too, right? And that's kind of how it is. Like I know myself, and now I know like my brain chemicals tend to cycle in a way that like every like second or third week I just have breakdowns, and like I'm getting better at learning how to deal with that. But I'm also like okay with sometimes knowing that sometimes I'm just gonna sit on the ground and cry for no reason. Like that's just what I'm gonna do, and then I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna like attack my to-do list because that'll make me feel better. But I think, I don't know, I love the whole like asking for what you need, and really like asking yourself that too. Like, what would make me feel better in this moment? Like, in the best possible way. Like, why am I anxious? What is causing me anxiety? And how, like, how can I address that? Like, I feel pressure to, like, FaceTime with my friends for an hour or two today, because, like, I want to see people, but at the same time, like, I don't want to be on a phone screen for an hour or two, and I need for me to, like, communicate that I need some time for myself, and I need to, like, decompress and be away from technology and just, like, sit down and think or cry or nap, whatever it is, but not too much.
Yeah.
So, which brings me to, like, another question I thought was really interesting, which is, like, how do you deal with uncontrollable circumstances?
Breathing. I breathe through it as best as I can. I think the way that my mind is wired is take a deep breath, immediately make the checklist of things that you can do or how you can react, but just understanding. You know what trick I use? I lie to myself. I go, I've been through worse, and even if this moment doesn't feel like it feels like this is going to be the worst, I just tell myself, like, I've been through worse, I can get through this. And that has always been, like, a grounding thing for me, because I always can trust that I can make it out the other side. And it really helps stabilize me in situations that are destabilizing. And I'm preparing myself for, this election, whichever way it goes, could possibly, like, be very destabilizing. And knowing how to go, okay, like, breathe, how, like, reset, how can I get what I need right now so I can show up for tomorrow.
Yeah. I feel that. I think, like, I'm big on control. I'm big on, like, feeling like I'm in control. And it's always, like, situations where I don't feel in control that lead me to, like, my unhealthiest coping mechanisms that, like, then I feel like I'm in control. So I feel like finding the list of things I can control is, like, always a good reminder, because it's easy to, like, feel out of control in one area and then, like, let that, like, echo chamber in your head of, like, your whole life is out of control, you can't do anything, like, you're just, like, a leaf in the wind. And I've never said that to myself. That was like ever. But just, like, stopping and being like, what can I control? I can control my routine. I can control, like, I'm going to stop and do breathing. I can control that, like, I'm going to wake up early. I can control, like, even the smallest things. Like, I control what kind of shampoo I use. Like, listing that stuff out. And, like, the other like, weekend, I had kind of an emotional breakdown. And I kind of just, like, it felt like everything was spiraling out of control. I was like, I can't do anything right. Like, I'm not an adult anymore. Like, all this kind of stuff. And then I sat down and, like, made a pros and cons list of, like, the situation, and realized that, like, my pros list was, like, 10 items long and my cons list was, like, 1 or 2 items. But in my mind, like, the negative had just blown up. And I know that about myself, that, like, the bad things tend to, like, the things that seem out of control, the things that seem negative tend to take up so much more space in my mind than the positive. So, like, getting it out of my head, realizing, like, where my power lies has been, like, invaluable. And then I'm gonna transition again.
I love it. I love all these transitions.
We're transitioning. I was thinking maybe we could end with talking about, like, voting a little bit, and then I think I've already kept you on here for, like, 34 minutes.
This is nothing for how long we usually talk. You and I are. If we plan to hang out, we're like, okay, we got to block out a few hours for this.
3 days. No. Yeah, so one thing is, okay, so there are a couple questions. We'll start, like, with the more, like, interpersonal side of it, and then maybe just go straight into, like, the logistics of, like, voting, and once voting's over, what can you do, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to start with the more interpersonal question of, have you ever had a relationship end because of politics? And that can, like, extend to, like, friendships or work relationships. And like, if so, how did you deal with that?
Thankfully, it's never been something that's, like a one-on-one relationship, but I've had some distant relationships where I'm just like, cool, I'm just going to cut this person off. Like, I have no interest of following them anymore. I have no interest of I with everything that has happened, it's not that I'm like gonna sit here and be like, Republicans are bad or Democrats are better or whatever it might be. It's like, no, I actually think that this president is really bad for our country and really stokes the flame of like white supremacy and makes this world like a scarier place for marginalized people. But what does bring me comfort is the fact that like I know that I can do my part. My mom always used to say this to me growing up. She's, like as an overthinker, I'd always be like, well, like, does this person not like me? Did I not do this thing? And she goes, well, did you do your part? Did you show up? If you screwed up, did you apologize? Did you show up when you say you were going to show up? Whatever it was, did you do your part? And I know for me, voting is that way. Is I'm going to do my part. I'm going to vote, and what happens, happens. But I know I did my part.
I love that. I love that a lot because on the like interpersonal side, I agree. Like it's easier when it's just someone like you follow or like a friendly acquaintance that you don't really talk to that much, but you just don't agree with like what they're posting, but you're not like close enough where it's like, you don't want to start the conversation. It's easy enough to like press the unfollow. I think like, I don't know. I've never had like a relationship, I think per se, like a close relationship end because of politics. But I think that, like, in those cases where, like, I have family members who are going to vote for Trump, and, like, I don't know how to, like, handle that, but, like, the most I can do is just, like, stop and, like, ask them, like, why? Like, can we talk about it? Like, not so I can yell at you, but I want to understand why this is the choice you're making. Like, you're a woman and you're going to vote for Trump. I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? And like listening to that and then trying to understand, trying to have an actual conversation, not just a yelling match, but one where people are like actively listening to the other person and responding. Like that's, to me, it's like what you said, like that's doing my part in that relationship. And if at the end of the day, like we can't agree, then like that's what it is. And for like my personal like mental health and where I want to put my emotional energy, that might be like a relationship I have to like distance myself from, because at this point in time, it's a reflection of like very different deep-rooted beliefs in terms of like human rights. It's not about like fiscal policy. Like I can be friends with you if we disagree on taxes, but like if you disagree on like, if we have like a fundamental disagreement on like how much of your body should a woman be able to control, or like like should Black Americans have equal access to housing loans? Like I believe that like yes they should, and if you don't, then like that really signals something a lot deeper than just politics in my mind, which to me is grounds for like distancing yourself from a relationship that you no longer feel is safe. And I think that's about safety more than it is like just ideological differences on like a surface level. And then in terms of doing your part in voting, heck yes. I keep hearing like, why vote? It's just gonna go this way. Like why bother voting? My vote doesn't count. So on and so forth. And it's like self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe your vote doesn't count and you don't vote, look at that. Your vote doesn't matter. You were right. Congratulations. And even like, first of all, like even if you're voting and you feel like your vote doesn't matter, at least you can say you did it. It's like you said, like you showed up, you did your part, you did what you could do in that situation. What else can you do? Like find other ways to make your voice heard. If you don't feel it's through voting, vote anyway, and then like look at other possibilities. I mean, and then like your voice will always be loudest on the local level. And if you actually want to influence national policy, get involved locally, because that's it's the local building block that like builds up high enough to like turn into like national representation, right? And like, so if you don't just vote.
If you aren't old enough to vote, I'm an overplanner. I'm an overthinker. I think I've checked my voter registration like 5 times for just for this election, pre-register to vote, learn about what's happening in the world, and figure out what your proximity to politics is. Mm-hmm. If you're like, okay, I'm only a person that can check the news like once a week and know what's happening, that's fine. Like, do whatever it is you need to do, but understand that like it is a privilege to vote. Like, we were very privileged to have that right, and we should exercise it. And it's unfortunate that like, due to like some of us feeling scared, like that's the reason we're all being like, please vote. But I'm glad at the end of the day that all of us are re-emphasizing how important voting is.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to let a privilege just like slide underneath the rug and be like, oh yeah, well that's just a part of life, so I'm gonna disregard it.
Yeah. And
take it for granted. Vote and peer pressure your parents into voting. If you can't vote, highly recommend that. It's super fun.
And remember that like, even if it's easy for you to vote, if you are voting age and it's easy for you to vote, like there are places in this country where votes are being suppressed. So if you're like, I can vote, also, look into like, how can I make sure others can vote as well? And this is a good time to plug and say like, Plus One Vote, who's like linked in every one of these things. Like that's I'm working with them. Great voting campaign. And they have a bunch of resources. Please, like, you should check out their website and their Instagram page if you are confused. They have a bunch of questions and links and everything to explain that voting process. But it's like, if you can't vote yet, then figure out what cause you're passionate about, and understand that like not everyone you can't do everything, right? You can't, if you're overextended, you won't be able to do as much as you could if you were like, I have a friend I was talking to a friend and I was like, I feel so overwhelmed. There are so many things to do. I don't know where to start. And he was like, don't go horizontally, go vertically, right? Like, instead of spreading yourself thin over every single thing, find the like few things that you're really passionate about and go deep and see like what you can do. And so, figure out what you're passionate about, what you care about, and then, check it on your local representatives. Like, where do they stand on those issues? Like, are they following through? What organizations, if you can't vote, what organizations, what nonprofits can you get involved with that want to like forward the mission that you're passionate about and like have that sort of impact? Like, fact check, have conversations, talk with your friends, talk to your friends about, if you can't vote, like, I think at 16 you can still, I just signed up to volunteer at the polls, because especially a lot of poll workers are middle-aged and older and elderly, and that right now is a more dangerous like demographic because of the pandemic. So I'm going to volunteer at the polls to try and like help out at the voting centers. And so and I think you can do that if you're like 16 or older, maybe 18 or older, maybe 16 or older. I don't know. I would look into it. I don't know this one. But there's a lot of things to do, and it's not like voting or nothing, and it's not national election voting or nothing. Like, really getting involved locally is going to have the biggest impact, like any way you slice it. And now I know you know that I'm kind of seeing it for everyone else too. I don't know. I've had you for 45 minutes, so I'm gonna let you go. But thank you so much for doing this and for listening to like part of my rants and lectures and drinking coffee with me virtually and talking and being open and sharing your experiences. I just love you.
I love you too, and I love this. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for everyone who watched. I really appreciate you guys like tuning in and spending time with us this morning. I hope you enjoyed your coffee as well.
Yes. Everybody stay classy. Go register to vote. And if you already registered, ask your 3 friends or family members if they have, and make a plan. Make sure you have a plan. If you're confused about a plan, check out Plus One Vote, or the highlight on my page that's called Vote. New York Times made an amazing interactive voting guide for everything voting by mail, absentee voting, all that. Goodbye. I'm just going to hang up now. We're leaving. Get out of here.